Hey guys, it's Marcus Graber. So we had a significant pullback in the market. We saw the S&P 500 go down a little bit today. We not only saw the S&P 500 go down, we saw the other growth stocks go down like Tesla, Palantir, other high growth stocks go down as well today. However, Tesla actually hit right on our target actually today. So that's pretty interesting. Let's get into that now. But before we get into this video, if you get any value from this content, don't forget to put a smash down on the like button. It really helps this content, helps other people see this video. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. It's free to do, and I'd really appreciate it. So the S&P 500 right over here, this isn't surprising what we're seeing so far. We talked about this idea that when we go to the upside here, and even though our price target was going to around 415, and we even have higher price targets of 420 based on some technical amplitudes. However, going to 415, we talked about this journey. And on the journey to 415, before we get there, it wouldn't be surprising to have a retracement back and test this breakout line right here before getting to 415. We talked about that. That wouldn't be surprising. We talked about the other scenario too, is if we went to 415 first, then we would probably retrace back and test this line over here. So everything is still playing according to our plan and according to our biases. Be aware that we have a bias to the upside. We are bullish and we're biased to the upside. Our biases do change, however, when we get to our price targets. Like if we go to 420, would we be more bullish or would we be more bearish? We'd probably be a little bit more bearish. So these are things that we have to be aware of and understand what my own biases are. This does not mean we won't go to the downside. There are reasons to be concerned at the moment. So if we just take a quick zoom back in time right here, we can see from the past, there are times that we broke above this trend line. One right here and one over here. And what happened during those two times? So we're in a similar point in time right here. And if we follow these two examples, we expect a move to the downside. Here, we had a long green streak and then a red day followed by a gap to the downside. This could be something that's setting up at the moment. We're having a long green session followed by a red day. Could we expect a gap down below this trend line in the near future? This wouldn't be the most craziest thing. It should be something that we have on our radar, that it's a possibility. This right over here too. We have a long, many green candles in a row, followed by some massive downside. So this is something that we need to be aware of. Do we expect these scenarios to play out? We are, again, on the bullish side of things. However, these are possibilities, learning from what has happened in the past and what traders have seen in the past. The psychology of traders, this can give us an indication of what we can expect. However, just in general, we have a few differences here. We're not necessarily coming off of the lows. We have a pretty overextended move followed by a pretty vertical move in both of these scenarios here. And over here, we're coming off of kind of the lows over here. And we're coming off of a period of consolidation as well. So there are a few differences and a few reasons why I am remaining bullish. And so this is kind of just an explanation of why is it I'm more bullish even though we have some bearish indicators. Now, if we look at Tesla stock here, we can see that we got to our price target, and moreover than just getting to our price target. In the last video, I talked about filling this gap at 777, which was the low. But before that video, in my previous videos, I mulled over this idea of, are we going to go to the upside and just fill this gap? Or are we probably going to go to the low of this candle here, which is exactly 780? And I talked about in the past that I think 780 is actually more important. And in my last video, I just I'm looking at the chart again for the first time and forgot that I thought that the line of 780 was actually more important when I talked about 780 versus 777. So we actually hit exactly 780 today. That is super interesting. And the fact that we got that spot on today is interesting. Now, where do we expect price to go now from here? Well, we do want to take a look at a few important points that we're seeing at the moment right now. We can see that if we take some of these candles over here, we have hit an interesting point at the moment. Do I think that this point that we hit in the moment is super important? I'm not exactly sure how important this line is actually. I don't think it's actually too important. Why am I bringing this up then? It's just interesting and it's an awareness to have, and we could interact with it in the future, whether it's to the downside or whether it's interacting trying to get above this. And why I'm saying trying to get above this is because I wouldn't be surprised for us to go a little bit lower. Why would I not be surprised? Because we have a gap right here. There are gaps in stocks. Not all gaps are created equal. I talked about this gap over here. I said that when we were on this trading day, when we created this gap, I said this is a gap we may never fill or may never fill for quite some time. And the reason for that is because of the greater stock market and some things I've been seeing in the stock market. However, this right here is a gap that I think will be filled, and I wouldn't be surprised for it to get filled. So maybe we see this gap being filled tomorrow or the next day. Well, we also have the bullish scenario of this line holding though, and us not going below this line. So we have a few different scenarios playing out, and we want to pay attention to what actually happens. So I think we trade, and again, I think we're going to go probably fill this gap. It's possible we don't. So there's a few different scenarios here. Where basically, I talked about my last video that I do think we're eventually going to surpass this line over here. I do think that is the scenario. Now, when do we do that though? I think again, it's probably going to take probably earnings for us to finally break through this. Now, it could be the run up to earnings, it could be after earnings, after the news about earnings. So, this is what I'm going to be looking for. And I'm not saying that it has to break above this line either. I just think, depending on where the stock price is, between where it is today and between earnings, whether it's leading up to earnings or whether it's after earnings, it's likely that the stock price will probably be a little bit higher, and earnings is coming next week. So we know that's going to be happening, and I'm kind of bullish on earnings because we had unexpectedly high deliveries. All of that could be priced into the stock at the moment, but I think that we will be surprised probably to the upside. And finally, I think that Tesla stock, it would not be crazy for us to at some point retest this line down here. So this is something that we need to be aware of. I don't know when we would test this. Maybe it would happen sooner than we think. Testing this line here before finally ultimately going to the upside wouldn't be so surprising. So we just need to be aware of that. Again, it's kind of in line with filling this gap here. If we fill this gap here, it wouldn't be so crazy for us to retest this breakout point. I don't think it means we have to retest this breakout point, but this is just something to be aware of. I think more likely than not, we go to this area of consolidation, which also coincides with this basically this gap right over here, and that's my target where we would go, not necessarily down here. So basically, if I'd have to say, I'd say are going to go down to the downside here, retest this area, which is the area of previous consolidation. It's the gap fill over here, and then finally go to the upside. And probably around the time of earnings, maybe we at least retest this point again. This line here will not be as significant as it was today, but it probably will still be significant. We have a lot of resistance over here again, a lot of folks that were trapped above here that probably want to sell some of their shares. So we have all this resistance up here. So we have people that want to break even. So every time we go up here, we're going to hit resistance. So this is Palantir stock right here, and not much is happening with Palantir stock. I'm still somewhat bullish to the upside. We can see that we are forming this trend line to the upside, roughly speaking here. So this is something that I'm watching at the moment here. I'm not exactly sure where we're going to go, but this is the line that I would say we need to stay above this line to stay on the bullish side. If we break below this trend line here, this is when we start to get a little bit bearish, because arguably we could get a little bit bearish today, because technically speaking, we did break below this trend here. We closed a little bit below it. But is this trend line as important as it was once before? Because we hit this trend line in the past. Once we broke out of it a little bit, it kind of made this trend line less relevant. This became less relevant over here, just like it became less relevant once we broke above it over here, and we even dipped below it on the day we broke out of it as well. So it became less relevant, and we need to be aware of that fact that this trend line, once we get above it a few times, it became less relevant. Just like over here, once we went above it a few times, it became less relevant. Well, I hope you guys got some value from this content. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel for more content like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. And keep in mind that none of this is financial advice. This is just some random guy on YouTube drawing some stick figure lines on a chart talking to you guys.